I'm on notes. I'm on notes. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking time on your Wednesday evening to join us for a CBE session tonight, Living the Dharma. Um, our speaker tonight, I've known since he was, I don't know, maybe even before he was walking. And I've known his family for altogether about three generations. His grandfather was a former president of Orange County Buddhist Church. His grandmother was a former president of the BWA, and his mother grew up at OCBC. And I saw Paul grow up from his youngest Dharma school uh, ages until through Sangha teens, junior YBA, playing sail, basketball, and he's just grown up to be such an outstanding young man. He's faced some tremendous challenges in life, having been diagnosed with cancer. I really think what he has to share tonight is something that we can all learn from and reflect on, no matter what age. Uh, just to formally introduce him, Paul Daisuke Goodman is the creative director at 8 East Productions and the writer and director of the award-winning film No No Girl. He is also an editor at the popular online Buddhist school Everyday Buddhist and has contributed to publications such as Lion's Roar and Pacific Citizen. Paul is a three-time cancer survivor and began making feature films after his initial diagnosis in 2016. If you haven't seen either of his films, Evergreen or No No Girl, I would highly recommend that you seek them out and watch them. He's going to be speaking today on finding my path as a young adult with cancer. So I'd like to, without any further ado, turn it over to Paul Goodman.
Thanks to Reverend Mar for the introduction, and thank you to Judy and everyone at the Center of Buddhist Education and the Living the Dharma Committee for inviting me to speak. I've never really done anything like this before, but I was really touched to be asked to talk about um, my cancer journey and my filmmaking and how all that ties into my Buddhist experience. So, like Sensei said, I grew up at OCBC, and my Jichan and Bachan were some of the founding members of the temple. And my parents grew up at OCB, or my mom grew up at OCBC, and I played basketball in junior Y. I was a summer camp counselor at this Southern California stay away Buddhist camp called LABCC. And a part of the volunteer work I do at OCBC, I feel like that was one of the most rewarding things I did. I studied film at UC Santa Barbara, and after college, I immediately started working in the film industry. I worked on a show called Whale Wars, which, if you guys remember, it was on Discovery Channel, and it kind of followed these animal activists across the ocean as they um, chased illegal fishermen. And I was a camera operator and a sound mixer on that show. So me and two other camera operators and a director and a producer were on the ship for over 100 days at sea, and we were recording and capturing this television show following these animal activists. And it was an incredible job to have coming out of college. It was exciting, and it um, I don't know, kind of pushed me physically, mentally, and I found a lot of joy out of doing it. And so I signed up to do another season the following year, and I thought, maybe this could be a career path for me. We're talking about paths. This was maybe the first path I saw was doing this job and moving on to bigger dream jobs. Maybe I would be shooting National Geographic or Discovery, like Blue Planet, Planet Earth stuff. And I thought that maybe that could be my future. Obviously, that all changed when my first cancer diagnosis happened. So I was first diagnosed with cancer at 25 years old, and it it happened quickly and kind of slowly. It happened over the summer, that summer of 2016. And I just started feeling strange. I had been a counselor at LABCC camp, and I remember being at camp thinking, "Oh, the altitude this year is really affecting my health, and I'm feeling a little sluggish." Um, I went on a trip to Alaska with one of my best friends, and I remember thinking there too, not hiking the way I'm used to. And then in September, I went blind in one eye, and I uh, I went to the optometrist because I was still in denial. But they told me to go to the hospital, and that's where everything started. They told me at the hospital that blood work came back, and it looks like you might have a form of leukemia. And I remember my first thought being that I wouldn't be able to go back to camp again, to LABCC. Just because Buddhism in my life is more than, and I think a lot of our lives is more than just trying to practice something. It's how we live every day. It's our friendships. It's our relationships. It's kind of how I identify as a person. Maybe not outwardly, but inside I always identify as that. When I got diagnosed with cancer, I felt a lot of feelings. I don't think I really felt any time like, oh, why is this happening to me? I I had known some people with cancer growing up, and I know it doesn't really discriminate. But I do remember feeling or looking back, recognizing that I was in a lot of denial. Like I didn't want to give up my life. I didn't want to change my behavior or pretend I was having some epiphany or life-changing moment. I really didn't want cancer to identify me. I liked, the person that I had built, I guess, for myself. But that was it did change me. It changed my entire life. And I think denial was a part of the fear in the moment, being 25 years old and having no control over anything in my life anymore. It felt like, I couldn't, that every decision was made for me. Every decision in the hospital, where I physically had to be, where I had to stay, where I could go and not go. And especially when it came to work, I couldn't do this dream job anymore. I couldn't follow that career path. And all those beautiful doors that I saw are all of a sudden permanently closed. And a lot of my relationships had to change. Um, you know, my we were just dating at the time. My wife V and I, we were just dating at that time. But I thought, how am I gonna I can't be with this person anymore because I'm probably gonna die now. But my wife was so brave. She was in medical school in Arizona, and I was doing treatment in Orange County. And I called her to tell her the news. And 2 days later, she was in the hospital room, and she told me that I love you and I want to spend the rest of our lives together. And it was one of the most important moments of my life because I said no. I said I don't think that's a good idea. And it's sad, but it's really nice because she said no as well. She was like, I don't care, and we're gonna make it work. And fast forward, we are married and we're living together, and I'm in remission now. And I look back at that time and have a lot of feelings about that. But it was a really important moment. I feel like more important than the first cancer diagnosis, just how the people around me acted. Um, so I talked about control and my feelings of denial at that time. So I tried to take control in any way that I could. And this is how I am interpreting these times when I look back, but I'm kind of still living in this feeling and I live like this, but I tried to take control by kind of diving more into work. I changed from going from the ideas of camera operating and Discovery Channel and all this other stuff. And I said, okay, I'm going to start writing scripts and we're going to start making narrative projects. So like short films and then eventually a feature film. And I remember within the first month of cancer, I said, okay, I can't do these jobs anymore, but that doesn't mean I can't pursue filmmaking. I'm going to make a feature film while I'm doing treatment. And that was, a pretty intense decision. But I think at that time I was also dealing with a lot of, um, I guess, a lot from my perspective, a lot of Buddhist themes, things like, you know, what does my life mean? Does my life have meaning? Or my legacy, things about myself and how I'm not satisfied with what I have, trying to overcompensate because of the impending doom I was facing to just go really hard into movie making and go really hard into writing. Um, and looking back, I don't know if someone told me this phrase or if I started saying it, but I kind of talk about cancer as another sensei in my life. So it's my cancer sensei. So my cancer sensei is always trying to teach me, but they're not trying to help me get the answer. They're just cancer sensei just gives you the riddle and lets you figure it out. So when I was resisting the change in my life, when I was committing to doing more work, and another thing I tried to control was my diet. Just all the things, since I was losing so much control, I tried to hang on to what I could. And physically resisting the change was hurting me. I was pushing myself way too hard. I was getting sick. I was going against doctor's orders. They told me to watch my diet and to eat not fatty foods, and I didn't take it seriously one day, and I went out with some of my close friends, and we went to a crab leg buffet, and I went crazy. I was been in the hospital for months, and I was like, crab legs, all right, boom, 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 ate a ton, and the next day I just started feeling weird, and the day after that I started feeling even more weird, and, and essentially I had a side effect of the chemotherapy, but my cholesterol level was out of control. It just spiked to this point where my blood was like fatty. It wasn't liquid, it was like coagulated. But it's just a part of me learning. My The cancer sensei is trying to teach me you need to accept this. You need to move with it. You can't move against it. And in some ways I did, but in a lot of ways it took me a really long time to try and figure that out. So in that vein, I did make a feature film during chemotherapy treatment. I told the doctors I got to push this chemo a little bit early and this chemo a little bit late, and that gave me a month. And in that month, I organized the crew and the funds and the equipment and transport everything, and we shot a road trip film, which was is called Evergreen. It's available on Amazon, but that was the first, that was a big professional move for me to kind of, I mean, not only re-identify who I was outside of cancer, but to change my path, like my life goals and what I saw in my life going forward. So I had Evergreen, I had this movie, it was showing at film festivals all over the country, and I'm in remission. I'm still doing like chemotherapy treatments, but I'm in remission. I'm generally feeling really strong. And I moved to Las Vegas with V. She's in her residency after medical school. She's doing residency in Las Vegas, so we moved there together for 3 years, and that was when the pandemic started. Um, I had been in quarantine essentially for 3 years, and a new quarantine started. I thought, oh, this is no biggie. I can deal with this. I've done this already. Uh, but it was during during the beginning of lockdown and COVID that my cancer would relapse again. So 3 years after the first diagnosis, my second cancer, same cancer, it would relapse. They would find it was a worse relapse. So the cancer would come back. I was 28 now, and the cancer came back in my brain and spinal fluid. And it was really scary because it was in the middle of COVID, so I couldn't have visitors. The circumstances in which I could see doctors was very strict. The diagnosis was really problematic. This was the one time where a doctor told me if the chemo doesn't work, then you probably have a month to live. And obviously, yeah, that affected me a lot. Um, Still in denial at this point about my life. I'm still convinced this cancer is not going to define me. I'm going to live a normal life despite all of this. And it's kind of ridiculous because physically I could not deny the cancer because although I felt very healthy, what doctors were telling me put me into three different hospitals. I was moved a lot. I was starting chemo, and I did start to have symptoms the second, they addressed the problem. So physically, I couldn't really deny what was happening. Emotionally, I was still, in denial. The second I relapsed, I did the same thing. I said, okay, well, I'm going to make another feature film. Evergreen is not even finished yet, essentially. There's a whole part of filmmaking where after it's done, you have to market it and put it in a streaming platform or sell it or what have you. I just said, kind of screw it. I'm gonna put it up on the internet and I'm just gonna put it out there and start another movie. So, second cancer. Second Cancer was different for a lot of reasons. One, I started writing what would be the second film, No No Girl, which is about um, our Japanese American community, the repercussions of the camps within our families and what that means present day. But another big thing that happened during my second cancer was that um, the support of not only my friends and family at OCBC, but the support of so many temples in California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, all over the country. Because in the second cancer, my only cure was a bone marrow transplant. But my bone marrow transplant requires a certain specific genetic match. So someone had to ideally, a match would come from someone Hapa like me, someone with half European, Ashkenazi, Jew makeup with a Japanese. That genetic combination would statistically find me a good match. And that was really rare in the registry at the time. So my good friend Derek, who got me sick on crab legs, he thought, I need to make up for that. No, I'm just making that up. But he started a website for me, and he and others started to push these bone marrow cheek swab drives, which I think many people in this chat know about because so many people turned up to register in the bone marrow drives to try and save my life as well as others. It was a huge movement. I didn't really know what was happening because I was so sick in the hospital. I would just get photos and text messages from my family and my friends showing people standing in parking lots with like Q-tips. And at first, I was just like, okay, that's nice. I guess this is what you do in COVID. But no, they were all there to try and see if they were a genetic match to share their bone marrow with me. And I think that just pushed me even harder to make this movie during my second cancer because the story was about my community. And I took so much from what I knew growing up into the characters, into the story and the setting. And, I wanted to control my life. I wanted to define myself as not a cancer person, but a filmmaker. But I also felt like I was so connected to our community in that time that I really did, I don't know, a weird obligation to just show that appreciation in this movie. Um, I would get a bone marrow transplant. Uh, they didn't find it in the drives, but I got it from my sibling, Lori, and I underwent the process and left the hospital, and I was in remission again. And it was a rough recovery, but I was I was I was alive and I didn't have cancer. And I was released from the hospital in March of that year. And in November of the same year, we were shooting that movie that I was writing in the hospital, No No Girl. So 8 months after I was released, we started shooting the feature film. And that was all a part of, I think, this is me trying to understand myself during that time, but it's very recent. I just feel like I was very determined to prove something to cancer and to myself that this wasn't going to stop me or change me. But also, I think it's a part of the control, a part of losing control to cancer, taking control of other areas. During this time, I was also, I was also editing videos for Everyday Buddhist, which is an online school, which I think many are familiar with. Reverend John is here, but he started this program. And during my first cancer, I was editing the videos and the lessons, and during my second cancer, I was doing it more. But Everyday Buddhist played a really big role in my recovery, I feel like, because as much as it gave me purpose, gave me something to do, I was able to do it in the hospital room. I could do it on the computer, and Reverend John was very understanding if I just needed a break or something. But I could do this job, and yes, it gave me a lot of purpose, gave me something I could control. But I started to realize I'm listening to every single lesson that's coming out of this program. And I was learning so much about Buddhism that I didn't have the education for growing up. I just kind of went to Sunday school and kind of felt it in my everyday life. But this was some of the lessons were like really high education stuff. But I started to see parallels between stories and teachings and my everyday life. I remember certain allegories very well. Like, I learned about the three poisons, which is this cycle of suffering where a pig and a bird and a snake are all eating each other's tail, and they all represent um, like resentment and um, I didn't learn it that well, right? But it was like ignorance and attachment and resentment, all these emotions eating each other, and you stay in this circle of suffering. And I remember thinking, wow, my resentment towards what I don't have is fighting with my attachment to the things I'm losing, and also the ignorance of not listening to my doctors. I can make parallels to so many things. I remember that lesson very specifically. But I also remember a lesson with about the allegory of the white path between two rivers. It's a parable, and one river is just torrential water, and another river is raging fire, and then right in the middle is this thin path towards enlightenment or nirvana. But I didn't take it as like I'm trying to be enlightened. I more just saw it like the path between pain and suffering is very thin. And I felt like I was walking a very thin path so many times in this cancer journey. And if I wasn't conscious or if I didn't have the right thought, I guess, I could easily fall into one of the rivers, which I did, many times. But editing Everyday Buddhist was really big during that time. So during the second cancer, I really felt my community there for me. I really felt, my friends and my family and all the temples fighting to save my life. And then I was getting it from Everyday Buddhist, mentally, emotionally, trying to get through every day. And and then I had my output, which was this movie, which I was so determined to make. And I was released from the hospital. We shot the movie 8 months later, as I said, um, and then I proposed to my wife, and we released the movie at the Japanese American National Museum in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. And people responded really well, and we were having screenings. We showed the movie at OCBC to we sold out the gym twice, and then I took it to all the other temples that supported me during my cancer journey. I mean, I just felt like it would when I would walk into um the Sacramento temple and see Koichi there and an inflatable screen that reached the top of the temple playing No No Girl, I knew that, wow, they all tried to save my life, and now I'm here sharing this thing I made. I'm still trying to understand just the full circle and the impact of those years, but all I can say is that I've never been more thankful about anything in my life. Um, but as things are going really well, we're on tour showing the film. I get married during this time at Tanaka Farms in Orange County, another place that held bone marrow drives for me. It was around right after I got married is when, the cancer sensei comes back and tells you you're not done yet. There's more to learn, I guess. I hate saying more to learn because it really just felt kind of rude from Cancer Sensei, but I ended up relapsing for this would be my third diagnosis. And this is the one that I'm currently in. I am in remission. I did another bone marrow transplant. I did a new procedure called CAR T, which is a kind of advanced procedure, something cutting edge and new. And with those two things, my oncologist is very hopeful that I will stay in remission. But that diagnosis was 2 years ago. And since then, I've tried to take a different approach, a different path to my recovery. I could have said, okay, we're gonna go in and make a third movie. Everyone, grab your stuff, we're going. Because every time I make this movie, I'm taking all my loved ones, all my support system, everyone with me. Many people in this chat know that feeling. Okay, Paul called me and asked if I could shoot the scene at the temple or if I'll make a New Year's breakfast to shoot on in the movie. Um, but this time I knew that I needed to understand, I needed to maybe listen to the cancer and what it's trying to tell me and redefine what's important for me. So I came out of the treatment, which was 6 months long and very grueling, and the recovery was very slow. But I just tried to listen to my body and listen to my wife and my family. And, they're not telling me, Paul, you shouldn't follow your dreams. They're telling me, just, Paul, you need to listen to what's happening, not try and fight the flow. Go with the flow of what is happening, and it's going to be okay. Um, and I did. And I think it's the third cancer, I was dealing with depression. I was dealing with so much anxiety. I was having PTSD like nightmares because of the constant idea that I'm healthy and then within days I'm facing death again. And that flip-flop. really kind of played with my security. So coming out of cancer, I got into therapy, I got into counseling, I tried to take it slow and gave myself a lot of grace and forgiveness. And for me, I think it really helped. I just don't know if suppressing all those feelings by diving into another um, film or passion project would have been great for me this time around. But what was good was that I was still editing for Everyday Buddhist, and this, with Everyday Buddhist, the lessons kind of are cyclical. You kind of hear parts of other lessons again, and when I would hear these lessons, sometimes similar lessons, I would receive them in this third cancer differently than when I heard them in the first cancer. And I feel like my growth during that time, I could see my growth just based off of how I was listening to the Dharma from John Sensei and Ellen Sensei and Reverend Wandra and all the guest speakers. Um, I remember so in the second or third cancer we started the guest speaker series where we would bring in senseis from all over the world to speak, and I remember hearing from Sensei Kenji Akahoshi and Sensei Mark Uno, and Reverend Uno would talk about this thing, other power, which I hadn't heard about before. But just this idea, there's other power and there's self-power, and self-power is your intent, your conscious intent to kind of shape and control your surroundings. It's what you can do to influence the world. But the other power is what the world is giving you, is what's outside you. And it kind of clicked for me about cancer of wow, with cancer and with these movies and with diving into these projects, I'm really just focused on my self-power, what my power can do to influence the world, but I'm not hearing the other power that's coming and telling me what I should be listening to. And these lessons, they all kind of like perfectly coincided with decisions I was making in my life at the time. So Reverend John and Reverend Allen, thank you very much for those. But I also remember Sensei Carmela Havayana, um, who I met recently at the BCA for a film and Buddhist seminar. But she talked about in her talk about how to deal with trauma and how trauma, if you don't understand it correctly, can lead to suffering. Um, but especially how pain can lead to awakening. And these ideas, are very abstract. And I never felt as though I was a, a very, I mean, I'm a passionate Buddhist person, but I never felt like I was a Buddhist scholar. So hearing these lessons, they really made me think about my experience, the path I was on, and just how to navigate this really, really strange time in my life during my 20s and early 30s. So, to kind of wrap it up, I really think that cancer as a sensei played a big role in growing during this time in my life. As much as cancer took away from me, it's giving me so much more. I feel like I have such a deeper connection to my community. I have allowed myself to learn about Buddhism so much more and allowed that to become more a part of my life. And I think it's made me feel a deeper love from those around me, from my wife, from my family, from my friends, from you all. I just feel more in tune, more accepting, and more grateful, even though, I will have to deal with this for the rest of my life. Um, I think that's it. If you have anyone that works at National Geographic, I still have that dream. So,
Well, thank you very much, Paul. It's amazing your journey that you've been on. So many things really struck me. To be able to look at your cancer as a sensei, or as a te really a teacher, that's tremendous. And how what if we could apply that to our own life, for you, it's cancer sensei, but for someone else, it might be difficult boss sensei or difficult mother-in-law sensei.
Mhm.
The thing that's really causing you such great suffering, to look at it as a teacher, then turns things totally around, huh?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I, I didn't see it always as a sensei, but only as the cancers progressed and as I would grow and understand my mortality and what my path was and stop resisting trying to change my path back to where I wanted it to go and just see where it was heading. Then I
mhm.
started to understand that the cancer is it's so dispassionate. It has no feelings. It is only teaching me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing that kind of struck me was when you talked about you felt it was kind of denial, but I kind of looked at it as, you personally were adapting, you were adjusting. Okay, I can't do this camera work on this whale thing, so well maybe I'll write, or maybe I'll create my. So to me, you were like adjusting and adapting, more than sort of denial. That's kind of how
Mm,
I looked at that
mm.
phase of your life, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
uh,
think like I said, I'm still in it and I'm kind of I look at the past 10 years and see it very from my own bias. So I see, oh, you're just panicking. But yeah,
uh,
I do think I was determined and I didn't want to give up.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And then, to think that a cancer, someone with cancer also has things like PTSD and depression, and now to have those mental health issues along with the physical issues is something that maybe most of us don't think about, uh, what cancer victims or other people with serious illnesses go through. So thanks for sharing that too.
Mm,
Uh-huh.
thank you.
Naman notes, naman
No one
notes,
knows.
naman
No one knows.
notes.
No one knows. No one knows.